Welcome to Private Stories, where people discover who they really are.
She walked out of the bedroom like she belonged to another life. The dress was new, a deep wine-red piece that clung to her body with deliberate elegance, the kind that didn't just attract attention but demanded it. The slit was higher than anything she had worn in years, revealing long, toned legs that once felt like they existed only for me. Her heels struck the hardwood floor with sharp, confident clicks, unfamiliar in their rhythm, almost theatrical, as if each step was part of a performance I hadn't been invited to watch. I sat on the couch, the TV flickering in front of me, though I couldn't recall a single thing playing on the screen. My attention had shifted entirely. I looked up once, just once, and in that moment I made a decision. I said nothing. That silence was the last piece of dignity I still owned, the final boundary I refused to let her cross. She didn't acknowledge me, not even a passing glance. Instead, she paused in the hallway, adjusting her earrings in the mirror with calm precision, her expression composed, distant, almost indifferent. It was as if I had already faded from her reality, as if my presence no longer registered in her world. Then she smiled, not warmly, not kindly, not even politely. It was a smirk, sharp, controlled, and filled with something I couldn't ignore. "I'm going out," she said casually, her voice light, almost playful, as if she were sharing something insignificant. "Try not to get jealous." No explanation, no hesitation, no trace of guilt, just those words dropped between us like they meant nothing. Her name was Vanessa, but in that moment, she felt like a stranger wearing my wife's face. She picked up her keys, the faint clink of ice in her glass echoing softly as she set it aside, and walked out without turning back. The door closed behind her with a quiet finality that lingered in the air. I didn't ask where she was going. I didn't ask who she was meeting. I didn't even move, but I watched. I always watched. The second the door shut, something in the house shifted. The silence grew heavier, pressing against the walls, settling into my chest. I stood up slowly, my body stiff, as if time had suddenly caught up with me all at once. In the kitchen, I reached for the bottle of wine she had been saving for a special occasion. I poured a glass, the dark liquid catching the dim light, but I didn't drink it. Instead, I sat at the table, staring at it, letting my thoughts arrange themselves piece by piece. Details began to surface, small, almost insignificant things I had ignored before. She hadn't taken her phone charger, she never forgot that, but she had taken her perfume, the expensive one she reserved for nights that mattered, and most of all, she hadn't hesitated. Not for a second, that certainty, that ease, stayed with me longer than anything else. I opened my laptop and typed a single word, betrayal, but I didn't get far. A notification appeared in the corner of the screen, subtle but impossible to ignore. Her tablet had synced again. It happened occasionally when she forgot to log out of the shared cloud, a small oversight that had never meant anything before. This time, it meant everything. I clicked. Images began to load, dozens of them. None showed faces, yet each one said more than enough. Skin against white hotel sheets. A mirror selfie with a man's shadow lingering just behind her. Fingers intertwined that I knew were not mine. My breath caught, not metaphorically, physically. My chest tightened, my lungs refusing to move, as if breathing would confirm what I was seeing. Then I found the audio files, 3 of them. I don't know why I chose the third one. Maybe some part of me already understood that it would hurt the most. Static filled the speakers at first, low and uneven. Then came whispers, then laughter, her laughter. Soft, intimate, unmistakable in a way that made my stomach twist, and then a man's voice followed. Familiar, too familiar. Dylan Carter, my friend, my guest. The man who had once stood in our living room, raising a glass to our future, speaking about loyalty like it was something sacred. "He still has no idea," Vanessa said, her tone amused, almost indulgent. "Why would I tell him? He thinks I'm at book club half the time." Dylan laughed quietly. "Poor guy," he added. "He's probably folding your laundry while we're talking." She laughed again, and something inside me shifted, not shattered, not exploded, just bent. Bent so far it would never return to what it once was. I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I didn't break anything. I did something far worse. I began to plan. I walked into our bedroom and opened her drawer, the one she believed I never touched. Inside lay her journal, tucked neatly beneath folded clothes. She didn't know I had read it before, back when curiosity had been harmless. Now, it felt like necessity. I flipped through the pages until something caught my eye. A date circled carefully, decorated with small drawn hearts. Next Friday, Beneath it, a hotel name, a time, a meeting. I stared at it for a long moment, letting the meaning settle in fully. Then I took a screenshot, printed everything, organized it with quiet precision, and for the first time in our entire relationship, I picked up my phone and called her mother. "Hi, Mrs. Whitmore," I said, my voice calm, controlled. "I just wanted to confirm family dinner next Friday. Everyone will be there, right?" She sounded warm, cheerful, completely unaware. "Of course," she said. "We wouldn't miss it." Perfect. That gave me 7 days. 7 days to become someone she had never imagined I could be. 7 days to prepare something she would never forget. Because when the truth finally reached her, it wouldn't feel like anger. It would feel like a funeral. The next morning, Vanessa moved through the house as if nothing had happened, as if the night before had never existed. As if those words she left hanging in the air hadn't quietly torn something apart inside me. She stood at the kitchen counter, pouring coffee into her favorite white mug, humming softly under her breath. The same melody she used to hum on slow Sunday mornings when everything between us still felt effortless and real. "Have you seen my gray scarf?" she asked casually, her voice light, distracted, not even bothering to look in my direction. I sat at the table, watching her closely now, studying every movement with a kind of clarity I had never allowed myself before. Everything she did felt different, too smooth, too deliberate, like she had rehearsed it, like I was no longer part of her life, just someone passing through the background of it. "No," I replied calmly. She nodded without really listening, her attention already back on her phone. A faint smile curved her lips, small and private, the kind meant for someone else, someone who wasn't sitting right across from her. And somehow, that quiet, effortless smile hurt more than everything I had seen the night before. Not the betrayal itself, but how natural it was for her, how easily she slipped between two versions of herself without hesitation, without guilt, without even a pause. She sat down across from me, barefoot, tucking one leg under herself, still scrolling, still smiling, still somewhere else entirely. I leaned back slightly, letting my eyes trace the details I used to admire without question. Her dark hair fell over her shoulder, catching the soft morning light, her skin flawless, untouched by anything resembling regret, her gray-green eyes alive, but not for me, not anymore. I stood up slowly, walked around the table, and kissed her on the cheek. "Have a good day," I said quietly. She smiled at me like everything was perfectly fine. "You too," and just like that, the illusion held. But the moment I stepped outside and closed the door behind me, I dropped the act. I didn't go to the office. Instead, I got into my car and drove across town, my mind already several steps ahead. The print shop was nearly empty when I walked in, a small bell chiming above the door as I entered. The man behind the counter glanced up briefly. "I need these printed," I said, placing a flash drive in front of him. He plugged it in, his eyes scanning the files, his expression shifting just enough to notice. A pause, a blink, a flicker of hesitation. Then he looked at me. "You sure about this?" he asked quietly. I met his gaze without flinching, front and back, organized, bound, tabs separating sections. He studied me for another second, then nodded. "All right, no mistakes," I added. There won't be. When I left, something had already begun. That was day one. By day three, everything was moving exactly as planned. I had rerouted our shared finances into a temporary holding structure, completely legal, carefully executed, invisible unless you knew where to look. Not revenge, protection, control. I met with a financial consultant recommended by an old colleague. A man who had been through his own divorce and now made a living helping others avoid losing everything to someone who had already taken too much emotionally. He didn't ask unnecessary questions. He didn't need to. "You're not reacting," he said at one point, watching me closely. "No," I replied evenly. "You're preparing," I nodded once. That night, Vanessa came home late again, her heels echoing softly through the hallway, her movements relaxed, satisfied, like she had spent her evening exactly where she wanted to be. "How was book club?" I asked casually. She smiled without missing a beat. "Incredible, you would have loved the discussion." I almost laughed, but instead I just nodded. "I'm sure I would have." She leaned in and kissed me, and for the first time in our entire marriage, I felt absolutely nothing. No warmth, no connection, no anger, just a quiet, hollow numbness that settled deeper than anything else. I watched her change, watched her slip into bed like nothing had shifted between us, like she hadn't already erased me from her world. Then her phone lit up and I saw the name before she turned it away. Dylan. Of course it was Dylan. He had stood beside me at our wedding, toasted to our future, sat in our living room and talked about loyalty like it was something unbreakable. I had told him not every marriage ends in failure. I had told him to stay strong. Turns out he stayed close instead. I wasn't even angry at him, not in the way people expect. I was angry at myself for not seeing it sooner, for mistaking kindness for safety, for believing respect couldn't be faked this well this long. But Vanessa, she didn't just lie. She lived inside the lie like it was her natural state. By day 5, I had everything I needed. I drove to the hotel listed in her journal, a sleek building in downtown Chicago, all glass and polished surfaces, the kind of place where no one questions you if you look like you belong. So I walked in like I did, confident, calm, expected. At the front desk, I smiled politely. "I just need to confirm a reservation," I said, giving her name. The clerk barely hesitated, typing quickly before nodding. "Yes, I see it. Could you remind me of the time and room number?" I asked casually. She glanced at the screen, then told me without suspicion. People rarely question confidence. That's the trick. I thanked her, left a tip, and walked out, everything now perfectly aligned. The time, the room, the exact moment her two lives would collide. That afternoon, I returned to the print shop. "2 more copies," I said. The man didn't ask questions this time. When he handed them to me, they looked clean, precise, undeniable. One for her, one for him, because I wasn't going to shout. I wasn't going to lose control. That wasn't who I was. I was the man who remembered, who documented, who revealed. And that's when the final idea formed, not impulsive, not emotional, but sharp and deliberate. That night I went back to the hotel, not to break in, but to position myself exactly where I needed to be. I booked the room next to theirs, waited until the hallway was empty, then stepped out and slid a single envelope beneath their door. Inside there were no threats, no accusations, no anger, just evidence, photos, transcripts. A printed confirmation of the family dinner scheduled for the next evening, the same night she believed she would be somewhere else entirely. And on the final page, one line, "Smile for the camera." Room 406 has the perfect view. She still had no idea, but by tomorrow she wouldn't just be exposed to me, she would be exposed to everyone. The next morning she was different. Not dramatically, not in a way anyone else would notice, but I saw it immediately. She was softer, more attentive, almost affectionate in a way that felt out of place after everything I knew. She walked into the bedroom carrying a cup of coffee and set it down beside me with a small, careful smile, then leaned in and kissed my forehead like she used to. Back when gestures like that meant something. She even wore my old hoodie, the one she used to call ugly but secretly loved when she wanted comfort. If I hadn't known the truth, I might have believed this was a beginning again. But I knew better, and that made every small kindness feel like part of a performance designed to ease her own conscience. She was trying to soften the edges of what she was about to do later that night, trying to convince herself she wasn't the kind of person who destroyed things without warning. I played along. I smiled, complimented her hair, told her she looked beautiful, even let my voice carry warmth I no longer felt. When she asked if I'd be okay with her going out that evening, just to clear her head, I nodded without hesitation. Offering the kind of calm reassurance you give someone who lies badly but thinks they're convincing. She left the house just after sunset, wearing that same deep burgundy dress, her heels echoing faintly as she walked down the driveway. She didn't look back once. Not a pause, not a hesitation, not even a second thought. I stood by the window, watching her disappear, then turned away and checked the time. Everything was moving exactly as planned. 25 minutes later, I pulled into the parking lot of Hawthorne Grill, the upscale steakhouse, where her parents were already seated with her sisters and their husbands. The dinner had been arranged weeks earlier, one of those obligatory family gatherings no one was particularly excited about but no one ever skipped. As I walked in alone, I could already see the confusion forming on their faces. Her mother was the first to speak, smiling with mild amusement. "Vanessa got stuck getting ready again," she joked. I returned the smile easily. "Something like that," I said, taking my seat. I greeted everyone warmly, made small talk, even raised a glass of sparkling water, explaining I had been driving a lot lately. Everything felt normal on the surface, polite, controlled, almost pleasant. Then, about 10 minutes into the meal, I reached into my bag and placed a single brown envelope in front of her mother. She frowned slightly, her fingers resting on it. "What's this?" she asked. "A mistake," I said calmly. "Just not mine." One by one, I placed identical envelopes in front of each person at the table, asking them not to open them yet. Her father's expression shifted immediately, suspicion replacing curiosity. "What is this about?" he asked, his voice tightening. I met his gaze steadily. "Everything inside is verified, timestamped, and backed up. I'd prefer if you wait until Vanessa arrives before opening them." Her younger sister leaned forward. "She's coming here," I nodded. "Yes. Any minute now." I didn't tell them that she still believed she was heading to a hotel suite. I didn't tell them she would find a note waiting for her, redirecting her here instead. I didn't tell them that every step she took tonight was already accounted for. At exactly 7:26 p.m., the restaurant door opened. I didn't need to turn to know it was her. I could feel it, the shift in the room, the subtle pause in movement, the quiet change in attention, but I looked anyway. There she was. Hair perfectly styled, heels sharp against the floor, that same confident smirk already forming as she stepped inside. And then it vanished the second she saw me, then her family, then the envelopes. She stopped walking, completely. Her eyes moved quickly from face to face, then back to me, trying to understand, trying to calculate. "Sit," I said quietly. Not harsh, not commanding, just neutral. She didn't move. Her mother spoke next, confusion bleeding into concern. "Vanessa, what's going on?" I watched the realization begin to form behind her eyes, watched her consider her options, deny, deflect, manipulate, escape. For a moment, it looked like she might cry. Instead, she laughed, a sharp, brittle sound that didn't belong in a place like this. "Oh my God," she said, forcing a smile. "Are you all really taking this seriously?" No one answered. I leaned forward slightly. "You can tell them it's fake," I said calmly. "You can say I'm insecure, that I manipulated everything. But once they read what's inside those envelopes, you won't walk into this place again without people whispering behind your back." Her expression hardened, her eyes narrowing as she searched for control. I reached into my bag again and placed one more envelope on the table, smaller, cream-colored, sealed neatly. "What's that?" she asked. I didn't answer. Her father picked it up instead and slid it toward her. "Open it." She hesitated, then slowly broke the seal. Inside was a single printed image, a still frame from a hotel security camera. Her and Dylan standing near an elevator, locked in an embrace, time-stamped in the early hours of the morning. The color drained from her face instantly. Not anger, not denial, panic. I leaned slightly closer, lowering my voice just enough so only she could hear. "Smile wider," I said. "The internet isn't impressed yet." The envelope slipped from her fingers, but I wasn't finished. Because this wasn't about a dress, or a hotel, or even him. This was about everything she believed she could do without consequence, and I had only just begun to show her how wrong she was. For a few seconds, no one spoke. The entire table seemed suspended in a fragile, suffocating silence, the kind that presses against your ears until it almost hurts. Vanessa stood frozen, one hand still gripping her purse as if it might anchor her to something stable, something familiar, but there was nothing left to hold on to. Her mother was the first to move, slowly opening the envelope in front of her. Page after page, her expression shifted, confusion giving way to disbelief, disbelief collapsing into something far heavier. Her father leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples, already understanding more than he wanted to. Her younger sister covered her mouth, eyes wide, scanning the printed messages like they might rearrange themselves into something less devastating. "How long?" she whispered, barely audible. I didn't look away from Vanessa. "Long enough," I said quietly, "to stop questioning my sanity and start trusting what I was seeing." Vanessa finally moved. She pulled out a chair and sat down, slowly, deliberately, as if sitting might somehow restore control over the situation. "This is pathetic," she muttered under her breath, though her voice lacked its usual confidence. Then she lifted her chin slightly, forcing composure. "You know what? If you were even half the man Dylan is." She didn't finish the sentence. I leaned forward just enough, my voice calm but sharp. "Say his name again," I said quietly. "I dare you." Her lips pressed together instantly, but the damage had already been done. Around the table, voices began to rise, questions, disbelief, fragments of outrage spilling over each other as the reality of what they were reading settled in. I reached into my pocket, pulled out my phone and tapped the screen. "Maybe this will help," I said, placing it on the table. Then I pressed play. The recording filled the space between us. Messages, voice notes, fragments of conversations carefully compiled, synchronized, impossible to dismiss. I had spent hours putting it together, pulling data from backups she didn't know existed, syncing devices she assumed I didn't understand. She had underestimated me in every possible way. But the clip that played next wasn't hers, it was his. Dylan's voice came through clearly, slurred slightly, bitter, unfiltered. He was drunk, angry, careless, revealing more than he ever intended. He talked about how easy it had been, how she thrived on attention, how she needed chaos to feel alive. He laughed about it, described it like a game, like something he had won. He called me predictable, said I was the kind of man people take advantage of without even thinking twice, and then he said something that changed everything. It hadn't started as an affair. It had started as a bet between him and another man that he could get inside her head faster than her heart. When the recording ended, the silence that followed was even heavier than before. It spread beyond our table, bleeding into the surrounding space, until even the quiet clink of silverware from nearby tables seemed distant. Vanessa looked like she had been hit by something she couldn't see. "I didn't know," she said quickly, her voice shaking now. "I swear I didn't. You didn't know I'd find it," I interrupted calmly. "That's what you mean." She turned to her parents, desperation replacing control. "He's twisting this. He hacked my accounts." "This isn't real." I reached into my jacket and placed a business card on the table, sliding it toward her father. "Independent digital forensics," I said. "Everything verified. Every file, every timestamp." I met her eyes again. "Nothing's altered. Nothing's missing. If you want more, check the deleted files, or the recovery data she forgot existed, or the location history that lines up perfectly with every hotel visit." Vanessa pushed her chair back suddenly. "No, I'm not doing this," she said, her voice rising. "Sit down," her father said sharply, his tone cutting through the room with a force that silenced everyone instantly. She froze halfway between standing and leaving, her face flushed, her breathing uneven, her composure finally breaking under the weight of what she could no longer control. I stood instead, adjusting my jacket slightly, my movements calm, measured. "You know what's interesting?" I said, looking at her for a long moment. "This isn't even the end." Her eyes flickered with confusion, then fear. "This," I gestured lightly toward the table, the envelopes, the evidence. "This is just the preview." I turned toward her parents briefly. "I'm not taking this to court. I'm not going to fight over assets or argue over who keeps what. I already know everything I need to know." Then I looked back at her, not with anger, not with sadness, but with absolute clarity. "But she's about to lose something she didn't even realize she still had." I didn't wait for a response. I turned and walked away from the table, leaving the noise, the questions, the unraveling behind me, because what came next wasn't meant for an audience. It was meant for her alone. That night, while she was still trying to explain, defend, survive the wreckage she had walked into, she received a message from me. No text, no explanation, just a link. When she opened it, she saw a video. Not a hallway camera, not a hotel clip, something far more personal. It had been recorded months earlier, hidden inside a small indoor camera I had installed to monitor our dog while we were away. Discreet, nearly invisible, tucked into a bookshelf she never touched. I had never intended to use it for anything else, until one afternoon, by accident, I accessed the archive, and I saw everything. She was in the living room, wearing a robe, pacing slowly, laughing on the phone. Then the door opened. Dylan walked in without knocking. What followed wasn't just betrayal, it was casual, comfortable, practiced. She poured him a drink, teased him, mocked me in ways I hadn't even imagined. She called me kind but dull, safe but unexciting. Said she stayed because I was predictable, because I made life easy. He laughed and she laughed with him. Then she said something I would never forget. She looked directly toward the camera without knowing it was there and said, "He thinks I'm his wife." That's the funniest part. I never confronted her about it, not then, not later. I just watched silently until the truth became undeniable, and now that truth was in her hands, unedited, uncut. Impossible to explain away. The video was titled simply, "You said this about me." She couldn't delete it. I had disabled that option. She couldn't forward it without exposing herself. And she couldn't deny it, not with the timestamps, not with the audio, not with her own voice betraying her. The next morning, my phone rang. I let it ring. Then came the messages. "We need to talk, please. That video is out of context. Out of context. That phrase echoed in my mind, hollow and meaningless. I replied with 2 words, check Dropbox. Inside, she found everything else: messages, recordings, location logs, every piece of evidence I had collected. And at the very bottom, one more video. This time, it was me. Sitting alone in our bedroom, calm, composed, looking directly into the camera. If you're watching this, I said, it means you've finally run out of ways to lie to yourself. You turned our marriage into something disposable, so here's my final decision. I'm not fighting you, I'm not arguing. I'm leaving. I paused for a second, then added quietly, you can keep everything else. I've already taken back the only thing that matters. The video ended there. No anger, no drama, just truth. And silence. 2 hours later, her younger sister called me. Her voice was sharp, unsteady, filled with something between anger and disbelief. I saw everything, she said without greeting. The messages, the recordings, all of it. I don't even know what to say. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling, letting her words pass through me without resistance. You don't have to say anything, I replied quietly. I just thought you deserved the truth. There was a pause on the line, then a softer tone slipped in. How did you live with this? She asked. I didn't answer right away because the truth wasn't simple. I hadn't lived with it, not really. I had just learned how to function around it, how to carry something broken without letting it show. I didn't, I said finally. I just got good at pretending I did. When the call ended, the silence returned, but it didn't feel heavy anymore. It felt clear. Like something had finally been cut away. Late that night, there was a knock at my door. I knew it was her before I even opened it. Vanessa stood there in the dim hallway light, stripped of everything that once made her look untouchable. Her hair was pulled back carelessly, her face bare, no makeup, no jewelry, no carefully constructed image. In her hands, she held something unexpected, an old notebook, my notebook. A worn, slightly bent journal from years ago, something I hadn't seen since high school. It had been buried in a box in the back of the closet, forgotten, or at least I thought it was. I found this, she said quietly, holding it out like it meant something more than it should, and I read it. I didn't invite her in, I didn't move aside. I just stood there, the door half open, the night air slipping in between us. Why are you here, Vanessa? I asked, my voice calm, almost detached. She looked down at the journal, flipping it open to a marked page. You wrote about being afraid no one would ever really choose you, she said softly. That people always wanted someone louder, someone more exciting, that you were just safe. I felt something tighten in my chest, but I didn't let it show. That's why I did it, she continued, her voice trembling slightly, because I hated that it felt true. I let out a quiet breath, something close to a hollow laugh, but without any humor in it. So you used my fear as a reason to betray me, I said. That's impressive. She flinched, but she didn't step back. Instead, she walked past me into the apartment. This time, I didn't stop her. Maybe I wanted to hear the rest. Maybe I needed to. She sat down on the edge of the couch, holding the journal like it was something fragile, something alive. I thought it would make me feel powerful, she admitted, being wanted by someone like him, someone unpredictable, someone intense. I thought that's what I needed. I stayed standing, watching her, waiting. But every time I came home, she continued, her voice growing quieter, you were still the same, kind, patient. You remembered everything, what I liked, what I hated. You folded my clothes, made sure I ate, noticed things no one else ever did. She swallowed hard, and it made me hate myself. I didn't move. You were never boring, she said, looking up at me now. You were just whole. And I didn't know how to live with that. Then why didn't you leave? I asked, the question coming out sharper than I expected. Why not just walk away? Her answer came too quickly. Because you wouldn't have stopped me, she said, and that would have made it worse. There it was. The truth wrapped in something that almost sounded like vulnerability, but underneath it was the same selfishness that had always been there. She wanted resistance. She wanted drama. She wanted to feel like a victim of something, not the cause of it. I nodded slowly. So you needed me to break first, I said. You needed me to fall apart so you could justify what you were doing. She didn't argue. She didn't deny it. That silence told me everything. She stood up slowly and walked to the kitchen counter, placing the journal next to my keys. For a moment, she just stared at it, like it represented something she had already destroyed beyond repair. I know you won't take me back, she said quietly. I'm not here for that. You needed to know I tried to fix it. No, I said firmly. You tried not to get caught. That's not the same thing, she nodded, accepting it this time. Then she reached into her coat pocket and pulled out something small, a USB drive. My stomach tightened instantly. What is that? I asked. She hesitated, then answered in a low voice. Insurance. Against what? Against him. Now she had my full attention. She looked down at the floor. He recorded things, she said slowly. Private things. He told me if I ever stopped seeing him, he'd send them to you, to my parents, to my job. I didn't even know he was recording half of it. A cold wave moved through me. He recorded you? I asked. She nodded. He called it leverage. I stepped back slightly, processing that, letting it settle into something larger than what I had already uncovered. And now you're giving this to me? I asked. Her eyes filled, but no tears fell. I thought maybe it would fix something, even a little. I took the USB from her hand without another word. She moved toward the door, pausing just before stepping out. I know I've lost everything, she said quietly. But if you ever find a way to forgive me, even just a little, let me know. I didn't respond. I simply closed the door. And then I stood there alone again, staring at the small object now resting in my hand. I should have destroyed it, thrown it away, pretended it didn't exist, but I didn't. I walked to my desk, sat down, and plugged it into my laptop. The screen lit up. Folders appeared, 6 of them, each labeled only with a date. No names, no explanations, just time. I opened the first one. The video started instantly. Grainy footage, a fixed angle, a room I recognized too well. Vanessa, Dylan. I closed it after a few seconds. I didn't need to see more of that. Not again. I moved to the next folder. This time it wasn't her. A different woman, dark hair, younger, nervous. The way she moved told me everything before the audio even began. Then his voice, calm. Controlled, manipulative. You said you needed the job, he murmured. I'm helping you, just relax, no one will see this. My blood went cold. I skipped forward. Another folder, another woman. Same pattern, different face, same voice, same control. By the time I opened the 5th folder, my hands were no longer steady. And then I saw someone I recognized. Emily, our former dog sitter. Young, polite, always a little shy, someone who had been in our home more than once. She sat on a couch, visibly uncomfortable, her posture tense, her arms wrapped around herself like she was trying to disappear. Then his voice again. You think anyone's going to believe you, he said calmly. You think your boss even knows your last name. She didn't respond. She just nodded slightly. And that was enough. I shut the laptop. For the first time in all of this, I didn't feel betrayed. I felt responsible, because I had let him into my home. I had trusted him. I had given him access. And now I was staring at proof that what he had done went far beyond an affair. I picked up my phone and texted Vanessa. Did you know about the others? She replied almost immediately. What others? I sent her a screenshot. Emily's face frozen mid-frame. No response after that. I stared at the screen for a long moment, then made another decision. This wasn't just my problem anymore. And it wasn't going to stay hidden. I didn't wait. I scrolled through my contacts and stopped at a name I hadn't called in years. My brother, Adrian Cole. A criminal defense attorney in New York. The kind of man who didn't react emotionally, who dissected problems like they were puzzles meant to be solved. If anyone could tell me what to do next, it was him. He answered on the 3rd ring. Adrian. There was a pause, then a shift in his tone. You don't call unless something's wrong. What happened? I didn't ease into it. This isn't about a divorce anymore, I said. It's bigger. I have evidence, a lot of it, and if I ignore it, I'm part of it. Silence. Then steady and controlled. Come to my office first thing in the morning. Don't send anything. Don't tell anyone else. Just bring everything you have. I will. He hung up. The next morning, I was at his office before it opened. Glass walls, quiet hallways, everything clean and precise, just like him. When he walked in, he didn't smile, didn't greet me the usual way. He just looked at me, really looked, like he was measuring what kind of damage had already been done. This isn't going to be easy, he said finally, but you did the right thing coming here. We sat down, and for the next 4 hours we went through everything, every file, every video. Every message. He didn't react the way most people would. No shock, no anger, just focused attention. He took notes, made copies, asked specific questions, dates, locations, timelines. At one point, he leaned back slightly and exhaled. You're not sitting on a scandal, he said. You're sitting on a felony, possibly multiple. I didn't respond. I already knew that. He outlined the next steps carefully. What could be used, what had to be handled delicately, who needed to see it, and most importantly, what I needed to avoid doing. No confrontation, he said firmly. No threats, no distribution. Let this go through the right channels. Will it be enough? I asked. He met my eyes. It's more than enough. By the time we finished, everything had been copied to secure drives, organized, prepared. By noon, a plan was in place. By evening, the evidence had been submitted, quietly, discreetly, through a contact he trusted in law enforcement. I didn't go to the police myself. That part was out of my hands now. And somehow that made it easier. That night, Vanessa texted me. He's threatening me. I stared at the message. Then another came. He said he'll send everything, not just the videos, messages. My conversations, things I told him about you. Curtis, he's going to destroy everything. I read it twice, then once more, and for a moment, just a brief one, I felt something I didn't expect, not anger. Not satisfaction, pity, because for the first time, she wasn't in control of the damage anymore. She wasn't the one manipulating, choosing, deciding. She was just another person caught in something she thought she could handle. I typed a reply, 2 words, too late. She didn't answer after that. 3 days passed. Then my phone rang, Adrian. They picked him up, he said without introduction. Quietly, it won't hit the news until charges are filed, but he's not walking away from this. I closed my eyes for a second, not relief. Not victory, just stillness. You stopped him, Adrian added. No, I said quietly. I just didn't ignore it. A week later, I moved out. Not because I had to, the house was in my name, but because I didn't want to stay in a place that still felt like her. The walls, the furniture, the air itself, it all held pieces of something I didn't want to carry anymore. I found a small apartment across the city. Minimal, quiet, clean, no shared closets. No lingering perfume in the fabric of the rooms, just space. The divorce was uncontested. She didn't ask for anything. I think she knew she had already taken more than enough. Months passed. Slowly, life began to feel normal again. Not the old version of normal. Something quieter, something more honest. I started running in the mornings, letting the rhythm clear my head. I signed up for a pottery class on a whim, something I never would have done before. I read books without checking my phone every 5 minutes, slept through the night without waking up with that tight pressure in my chest. And for the first time in years, I stopped expecting something to go wrong. I met someone eventually. Her name was Camille. We met in a bookstore, both reaching for the same worn-out novel neither of us had actually planned to read. She laughed first, soft and genuine, the kind of laugh that didn't feel practiced or calculated. Do you even like this author? She asked. Not really, I admitted. Good, she smiled. Neither do I. We ended up getting coffee. We didn't talk about the past, not mine, not hers. We talked about music, about places we wanted to see, about small, unimportant things that somehow felt more real than anything I had lived through before. The first time she came over to my apartment, she looked around, taking in the quiet, the simplicity, the absence of anything unnecessary. It feels peaceful here, she said. And that's when I realized something. She was right. It was peaceful because I was finally free, not just from Vanessa, not just from Dylan, but from the version of myself that thought silence meant weakness, that believed loyalty required endurance even when everything was already broken. That version of me was gone. What remained was someone who understood the difference between patience and self-destruction, between love and illusion. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel the need to explain any of that to anyone. I just lived it, quietly, honestly, completely.
Thank you for watching this video to the end. Visit our channel for interesting and intriguing stories.